Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Ranney, and I serve on the board of directors for the Grand Canyon Historical Society. And we welcome you to tonight's virtual outing. The Grand Canyon Historical Society, our mission is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. And just last year in 2024, we celebrated 40 years of existence when the society was started by some pioneer members of Grand Canyon Village. We encourage you to become a member. Our dues are only $35 a year. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we're hopeful that many of you can join us so that we can continue to expand all of our activities like these virtual outings and in-person outings and our tri-annual history symposiums. If you do become a member, you'll get 4 issues in the calendar year of the Old Pioneer magazine, which has a lot of history articles about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon region. So we do these virtual outings. We conduct tours at the South and North Rim, and you can find it on our website. Our website is very easy, grandcanyonhistory.org.
So I'm going to introduce Bryan here. Bryan Bates found his place in nature at an early age. As a mountaineering camp counselor, Bryan metamorphosed into a career science teacher with 10 years on the Navajo Nation, 24 years at Coconino Community College, and 10 years at other high schools and colleges.
I became interested in cultural astronomy while teaching on the Navajo Nation, and it's become, well, I'll call it a hobby. If you understand, a hobby is something that first takes over the kitchen table and then crawls into your wallet. At any rate, my objective tonight is to give you a general overview of how astronomy and science can help improve the probability of survival of a indigenous group, regardless of where they are on the planet. As well, it also figures into people's religions. So astronomy and religion are very closely engaged. And in addition, I want to get you all involved in a conversation, perhaps at the end, as to what we can learn from ancestral people of the Southwest. So let me begin with a little bit of astronomy. In that, you can see there is the individual in the middle there, and you see the east and the west. And what ends up happening is that you can observe or follow the, what I want to say here, you can observe or follow the movement of stars, the sun, the moon, through the sky. What did I just do? Did I give you, here, let me just do this. Now, if we go out, this is looking back at the sun and the Earth's orbit about the sun. So the sun is there as the yellow dot where it says vernal equinox. And this would be the Earth's pathway. The blue is the Earth's pathway around the sun. And at 2 times during the year, and coming up in just a week or so, is the autumnal equinox. And what ends up happening is that the equator of the Earth aligns with the sun, and that's what we call the celestial equator. So astronomers measure everything from the celestial equator. Now, very quickly, if we start with the, let me go back, please. If we start with the spring equinox, as we move from the spring equinox, we'll go to the summer solstice, but halfway in between, right about here, is May 1st. And of course, we know that as May Day, which is the coming of spring, and that's a cross quarters day, meaning it's halfway between the sun and between the equinox and the solstice. As we go from the summer solstice on August 6th, we came to a second cross quarter date, known in Europe as Lammas, and this is halfway. This was a time at which one would begin preparing for the coming winter. The autumn equinox will come on September 21st, and just beyond where the ecliptic is marked there is October 31st. And some of you probably recognize that date, but it was Sondheim in ancient Europe, or Samhain, as some people will pronounce it. And the people would go out and put water and food near the graves of those who had passed away, so that those spirits would not come back to your door asking to come in when it was cold outside. So that's where Halloween comes from. Winter solstice, of course, is the shortest day of the year, and it is a time that's very important to the Hopi, as I'll talk about a bit more as we go through the presentation. And then we come to February 2nd, which we know as Groundhog's Day. That too is a cross quarters date. And the significance of that is that in Europe, people would begin to see likely female critters, such as maybe it was a bear or some hibernating mammal would come out, because the female had been feeding the young after having given birth in the den. And so she was looking for food. And if it was a cloudy day, then the organism, the mammal, would not have seen its shadow. And so it would have been warmer because the clouds hold the heat in. But if it was a clear, cold day, that meant that there was going to be a longer winter. So that's a little bit about our astronomy, because we have our own cultural astronomy. Secondly, not only does the Earth go about the sun, but it does at an angle. And so not only are we angled to the sun, giving us the different seasons, but we also spin at that angle. And that's what's going to make the days longer during the summer and then shorter at winter. The other thing to be aware of is the moon, because we have our ancestral observer here, and that individual has a consistent horizon. I've got to go back just a minute. Has a consistent, what did I do? I know what I did. Okay, at any rate, what ends up happening is that here's the summer solstice sunset, or sunrise, either one, and here's the winter solstice. Well, the moon will move in its position along the horizon. So this will be the minimum of the moon. And in 14.5 days, it will go to the southern. And if it was a full moon at the northern, it would be a new moon at the southern. Then it will come back. But when it comes back, it goes a little bit further, and then a little bit further south. And each lunation, then it will go just a bit more until it arrives at the point where is the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And that's the time period at which we have the most solar eclipses. Very briefly, speaking of solar eclipses, on, I believe it is October 14th of 2023, there will be an annular eclipse that will go right through Chaco Canyon. And so I'll be there with a group of people, but it will be a fantastic event. And I encourage you to consider going up near the Four Corners region to see the annular eclipse. What ends up happening then is that the moon will go beyond the sun's orbit. And so now you can tell the difference between sun position and moon position beyond the sun. And this cycle then, to get from the lunar minimum to the lunar maximum, where my arrow is now, will take 9.3 years. And then it takes 9.3 years to get back. So that's what we call the 18.6 year lunar standstill cycle. So what I'd like to go through next then is to share with you, oops, I got to go back. I'm hitting the wrong button. It's real sensitive on my computer. How do I know, how do cultural astronomers know whether or not a site is culturally significant? At first, you have to do a great deal of ethnographic evidence. So you look through volumes of documents in the library. And in fact, I spend more time in the library doing research than I do in the actual field. Second, you have to ask yourself, can the observer actually anticipate? Can they predict that some event is likely to happen at some important time periods within their cultural knowledge base? And then finally, and most importantly, is does your research indicate how the information was used by the native peoples? As an example, on the lower right-hand side, there is a picture of the of a Sanawa equinox marker. If you saw the last Tuesday, there was an article I wrote in the Daily Sun. This is the same site. And so this is an equinox marker. And what's interesting is that this is the time of the Hopi Mamzara women's ceremony, and that would be the spring ceremony. And they have a similar ceremony in the fall called the Lalakantu. But this is a time at which the women will, they control the ceremonial cycle between February cross quarter and May cross quarter. And then it transitions to the men. And then as of August 6th, then it becomes a women's ceremony again. And now we're approaching the equinox for the Lalakantu. And following that is a time of Hopi weddings. So that's part of what I mean by understanding the ethnographic evidence and then asking how is the information derived from a site, how is that used culturally? Now, this is a painting by a good friend of mine, Filmer Kiwanyama, and Filmer took the Hopi calendar system and he put it into this picture, into this painting. And I will go through it briefly because there's much more information here than I have time to cover. In the center, you see the Hopi sun god. So that's marking the position of not only the going to the top, that would be the winter solstice. Going to the right, that would be the equinox. Going down to the kiva there, that would be the summer solstice. And then going to the left, that would be the fall equinox. The feathers in between then are marking those cross quarter dates that I spoke of. So if we start going out the top, what has happened is that Filmer took the Ahole and the Ahaha Katsinas, both of whom are responsible for following the sun and making sure that the sun follows its pathway. And he put them together in one Katsina. Then off to the right, the white figure you see there is Iatoto. Iatoto is accompanies all of the Katsinas. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what Katsinas is, and they are the spiritual essence of initiated Hopis who have passed away. And what will happen when a Hopi passes away is that their body will be placed facing the sun, and then with the sun rising, then their spirit will be carried through the sky and placed in a high point. So for many, that high point is the San Francisco Peaks, but it could also have been Navajo Mountain up by Lake Powell. or another mountain. And the point behind this is that the Hopi believe that death is yet again another transition in life in which you go to a spiritual being. And then the Shaker, and he is standing over the San Francisco peaks, and the Katsinas then return to the peaks and then bring the rains in the fall, as I said before. Down below, there is the equinox ceremony going to the Mamzara, and that is the individual standing there looking at what is a tree and one of the, I believe that's Corn Maiden Katsina. As you come down, the eagle represents all life. It represents the wildlife and not just human life for when to conduct certain parts of the ceremony. So not only do they have an annual calendar, they actually have a very accurate hourly calendar and use the movement of the stars or the sun or the moon as it transits across the steps there. Coming on across, we come to the snake dance off to the left. The snake dance then will oftentimes changes from year to year with the flute dance, which is shown up above, and you can see the individual playing the flute. It looks like he's blowing like water, but it's a flute. And then across from him is the maiden going into the Lala Kantu dance, and up above then you have the Lala Kantu dance and the... Thank you, Tom. At any rate, the Wu Tsim is a male rites of passage, and each year all of the initiated Hopi men and boys go through this ceremony to learn new responsibilities in their life. So there's a lot of information there, and I'm hopeful that you begin to understand that this is the Hopi cultural calendar system. Now, I was very fortunate to go to be on a Park Service river trip in which I was asked to survey different sites in the Grand Canyon, and this was in September of 1992. That is just above the Cardenas campsite at River Mile 71.5. Now, if you go up there in the first photo, there you can see the hilltop ruin itself, and look off a little bit to the right, and you can see people standing up on that hill. Well, if you stand on that hill, then what ends up happening is that there is this location where there's a circle of stones that was created by humans. Now, in the second photo, the middle one there, I have my theodolite or my transits in that region several years ago. I don't remember what time it was, what year it was, but at any rate, this site is right across from where that archaeological dig was. Why isn't this working? Okay. In the lower, if you look at the picture in the lower right-hand side, you can see that there is a circle of rocks. Now, that is the site I spoke of earlier, and I was on this trip with Dr. Jan Balsam, as well as Grand Canyon archaeologist Helen Fairley, and both of them independently described the site as a probable shrine. Now, if you look at the yellow dot, somehow it got moved, but if you just take it straight up to the horizon, that's where the winter solstice sun will rise. And there is a large rock slab up there that creates a window. Now, you probably can't see it, even with, it's a challenge to see it with binoculars. But if you go there and just look at the horizon, you can't see it. because the sun isn't coming through it. But at any rate, the sun does come through it on the winter solstice, and it will be in that window for about 4 days, maybe 5 if you're lucky. At any rate, what happens is that the canyon rim itself acts as the reference horizon. So it's a reference seasonal marker for sky migration. So what about Hopi cultural connections? I want to share that I'm doing this presentation with the permission of Lee Wayne Lomiestawa, who I invited to come to this, but unfortunately didn't have the URL to send to him. But at any rate, he gave me permission to share what I am sharing with you. First of all, Lee Wayne Lomiestawa, who is the Assistant Director of the Hopi Cultural Preservation Office, shared with me that the Sun Clan and the Bear Clan both mark the sunrise and the sunset as it migrates across the horizon. And both of those clans lived at Unkar Delta. Now that information comes from Barton Wright, who is passed on, but he was the archaeologist at the Museum of Northern Arizona. Well, what ends up happening is this sun watching allows for predicting of seasonal changes. But it should be mentioned that Hopi ceremonies are always, to my knowledge, they normally begin with the first crescent of a moon. So the Hopi mark moon days as opposed to days marked by the sun. Well, in late 1800s, Alexander Stevens, who lived with the Hopi for numerous years, and a researcher by the name of Frigout, said that both the Bear Clan was involved with the Solyol winter solstice ceremony. And so the Solyol is the time at which the Ahole and the Ahaha Katsina will go to escort the sun back from the south. In addition, Stevens was the one who provided me with his writings, and it's called the Hopi Journal. It is in the Museum of, it is at Klein Library at NAU. And Richard Cordaroli, who I see is on the, is attending tonight. Richard Cordaroli was a major help in my finding a lot of the information I'm sharing with you. Now, there is the Palakwapi Trail. So I am shifting locations here. And this is out by Hamalavi. And the Palakwapi Trail actually begins up in the Hopi, and then it will go all the way down into Mexico, as far south as Durango, Mexico. Well, what ends up happening is that the Palakwapi Trail was an exchange trail. It goes through Chavez Pass, then on down into the Verde Valley. One branch spears off and goes over by Prescott and then across to the Pacific Ocean, and the other one goes on down into Mexico. But what happens is not only were items such as turquoise or pottery and so forth, not only were they carried across this trail, in addition, so was knowledge. So you might be along this trail, which, by the way, is not an actual trail. It's more of a region in which you make your way from one source of water to another source of water. And that's where a lot of these Hopi sites are along the Mogollon Rim. So at any rate, this was a site that I was able to go study for a while, and did so with a with a high school gal who ended up going with me to Africa, to Canary Islands, and she was the youngest presenter at any Oxford International Conference at that time. So if you look to the left and come down to the right, what you will see is the movement of that shadow dagger across the face of the spiral petroglyph. And so this is actually marking the equinox. If you've been to this site, I ask you to be respectful. And if you take other people to it, please make sure that you leave no trace. This is a continuation of those. And now you can see in the upper left how the shadow dagger comes right through the center of that spiral petroglyph and then proceeds on off of the petroglyph itself. And if you continue to watch it, what ends up happening is that the shadow comes over, and you will see in the bottom left picture that it goes, bottom right picture, that it goes into the wall. And Dr. Todd Bostwick, who is the archaeologist for the Verde Valley Center, the archaeological center there, actually believes that this is a place where the medicine men and medicine people would take vision quest. And so they would have an out-of-body experience and then go speak with their God. This is a picture that I drew of the interaction of the light shadow across time. So if you look at the very bottom right, you will see that that's the winter solstice. And then as you come up to February 2nd and correspondingly October 31st, you get a light shadow line that goes across the very top of the petroglyph. Then the rock nubbin that you can see is marking the equinox. And May 1st and August 6th, you get the light shadow line across the far right-hand side as you look at the petroglyph. So what ends up happening is that this is marking the seasonal change of light as driven by the Earth's orbit about the sun. I've already explained this. I forgot that I put this in afterwards. So this is what Dr. Todd Bostwick thinks might be a shaman's portal. Now, I'm going to go out to Wapatki real quick. And I did a lot of work at Wapatki. This is out at the Kraken Rock ruins, and you can take hikes out there with the Park Service Rangers, and you need to sign up for those in the early summer. But this is a site at Kraken Rock. It's on Middle Mesa, which I define as a hierophany. And a hierophany, if you look at the word, hiero, as in hieroglyph, means hidden. And phanos means light. So it's hidden light, or how the light reveals itself. And it's thought that hierophanies are human perceptions of events that have some religious or spiritual essence about it. And so if we stand behind the wall and look at the eastern horizon, you'll notice how flat it is. And it's flat, being flat provides no reference at all for the movement of the sun across the sky. So what ends up happening is that the windows that have been placed in the wall are a constructed, purposeful observation portal giving you a reference marker. This is one of the windows, and all of them are very similar. It's about 5 inches in width, but about 30 inches in length. So it's a long tube that focuses your vision to the horizon looking to the east. Unfortunately, I took this picture 30 years ago, looking to the west, never imagining that I was going to be doing presentations. And then this second picture shows you the light shadow line coming across the center, coming across the opening of one of these windows. And that light shadow line changes every day except at the solstices. So you can actually anticipate when the sun will be in the center of a window. Well, I was fortunate to stay out there overnight a couple of times and to get the pictures I'm going to share with you. And what ends up happening is that at the south window, this is the October 31st, February 6th position of sunrise along the horizon. And notice that the sun is right in the center of the window. Using the same camera, the same film, this is a sunrise going through the May 1st and August 6th window. And then this is a different camera, handheld, taking a photo of the sunrise at the summer solstice, which would be June 21st. Well, if we look at this wall carefully, you can see the two windows on the left-hand side, but you can't see it on the right-hand side, and that's because they're at different angles. In addition, what ends up happening is that when the light comes through the window on the far left-hand side on February 2nd or thereabouts, that marks the beginning of the Puwamuya ceremony. And the Puwamuya ceremony involves having planting beans inside the kiva, and then those beans will germinate because one, you have a fire, so it's warm. Two, you have light that can drive photosynthesis. And three, you have people who are giving it water. So you've created an artificial environment, but in the process, you are noting that the spring is coming back. So this is a spiritual preparation for the coming of spring or the return of life. And if you note that within our own religion, within Christianity, I should say, that Easter itself is a marking of the return of life during the time of spring. If you go to the second window, that window marks the time at which one would begin preparing to plant. This is a May 1st event. And the preparation for that comes at a time in which it's warmed up enough that the soil now will support the germination of seeds. So you're preparing to plant, you're not necessarily planting, but keep in mind at this point at Wapatki, you're probably around 4,500, maybe 5,000 feet, as opposed to 7,000 feet here in Flagstaff. The last window, then the sun comes through on the summer solstice. And what ends up happening is that the sun comes through the center, but it is not until the sun begins to move back to the south that the announcement is made in the kiva. At the time that announcement is made, then there is a preparation of 10 days. So you're going from June 21st to July 1st. And then you have the beginnings of a ceremony that will go on for 15 days or so. So you're in mid-July before this happens. And of course, now what you're seeing is the beginning of the monsoon season. Now, for all of these window observations through these windows, the water clan is involved. And so the water clan is one of the clans that has members in Hopi society that are then engaged in a lot of the spring, the late winter, early spring events. Now, if you walk to the east side of Middle Mesa there at Kraken Rock, you will see that there is this petroglyph of what I was told was the water clan. And at any rate, I took this picture, and that information came from my sharing it with numerous other people, with numerous Hopi people, is what I meant to say. And so I was at a conference, I presented this at a conference in, oh, I forget which year, but at any rate, in the lower right-hand corner, you see the light coming to the center to mark the side of it. And what ends up happening is that is the winter solstice. Well, the short of a long story is that this site, this petroglyph, is not just water clan, but also sand clan. And what ends up happening is that if you look in Fuchs's documents, he calls it sand clan, but if you when I talked to the Hopi people, they said it was water clan, and it turns out that I've forgotten his name. Do you all ever have a time in which you know exactly what you want to say and you can't say it? At any rate, it turns out that Alexander Stevens says that the water clan and the sand clan merged. And so the Hopi of today may not have known of that merger, and thus told me that it was the sand of the water clan. This is a Kiva site that was excavated by Harold Colton at the Museum of Northern Arizona. This was probably back in the 1930s or so. At any rate, this is right next to this wall, the solar calendar wall. So now you have a religious structure next to an astronomical observation location. And so I think there's a lot of connection between the religion practice, the spiritual practices of the Hopi, as well as their astronomy. Let me stop there for a minute. I'm going to go back and Tom, if we could, let's open up, and I could take a few questions now, and then if folks want me to continue, I can take them to Chaco. But I intentionally chose these three sites to begin with because they are in the Grand Canyon area, and the settlers, I shouldn't say settlers, the Hopi who settled at Wapatki likely came from the Grand Canyon.
Hey, Bryan, we're having some problems with the volume coming in and out on you. I think what we should do, if you don't mind, is if people have questions, please type those into the chat, and you can, I'll field those out to you if they show up, and otherwise, please proceed with your talk.
Okay. I'm just looking at the chat real quickly here. So, yes, the website is www.scaas.org, and I am one of the people that founded that. Tom, I'm not sure where you got the CJ SCA.
I'm not sure either. It came in your bio somehow. Not to worry. Did you see Susan's question? Do you know what the meaning of the spiral is?
Oh, that is, no, we don't know what it is. However, there is some research by, I'll think of his name later, but there are things called entopic patterns. And so we humans see a lot of the same things, whether we're Chinese, from Argentina, from Europe, or from the the North American continent. Humans see certain patterns, and one of those patterns is the spiral. Squares, snake-like lines, triangles, circles, those are all entopic patterns as well. So there is a lot of conjecture that cultural astronomy sites are largely spiral petroglyphs. And that simply does not play out in the data. So we see numerous different types of petroglyphs being used to mark the movement of the sun or the moon. Tom, would you like me to continue and go to Chaco Canyon? It's a long way away from the Grand Canyon.
Yes, please. We'll go with it's a virtual outing, so take us there.
Okay. Let's go to Chaco. Let me close this.
Bryan, there was one question before you go on. Susie asked, can you speak to the correlation between those findings and the Hopi clan migration stories?
Let me share that I do not know a lot about the Hopi migration stories. I do know that the Water Clan, it's thought that some of their relatives were as far south as northern Mexico because of the different petroglyphs that have been seen. But it would be improper for me to talk about Hopi migration stories because I don't know them. Peter Pillis might, if you know Peter Pillis, he may have some information or be able to lead you to appropriate information. Okay, this is a picture of Pueblo Bonito in 1896. And this is taken from the chacoarchive.org website. And so the Museum of American Natural History was paid for George Pepper and Richard Wetherill to begin the excavation of Chaco. And if you look, I'm going to try to do this without changing. There is a home that Richard Wetherill built. Here is part of their, I think that's their store. And then this is their corral. So, but look at Chaco itself, and it's vastly different in 1896 than it is today. This is a photograph taken by Charles Lindbergh. I don't have the year, but Charles Lindbergh actually was taking pictures for Emil Howry from the University of Arizona and documenting numerous sites while flying cargo back and forth for TWA. So he is kind of moonlighting on TWA's nickel, if you will. And so this then is the reconstructed and fully excavated Pueblo Bonito. This is Fajada Butte. And if you've been to Chaco, you likely have seen this. It's very enigmatic. And it is a remnant of the Mancos and other Mesa Verde geologic formations. But one of the things that you have to do is you always have to send the ranger up the cliff first. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, he has the key to open the gate. Number two, he has the ropes to climb up. And number three, there's a resident rattlesnake that lives down at the bottom of this. And the ranger is the first one to go. So at any rate, we're going up and we get to the site. And this is the 3 slab site, or the Sundagger site as it's more commonly referred to. There has been a lot of questions about how this site formed. But if you will, in your mind, take those 3 huge boulders, squeeze them together, now lift them up, and you can see that there's a crack right above it. And then if those rocks were to slide down, hit the ground, and they would splay apart, then you would get the three slabs in the position that they are now. That is the most commonly accepted version of their orientation. Now, some people say, well, they moved them around. Well, those things are so heavy, you would need some sort of block and tackle. And there's absolutely no evidence that they had any way to, they never created some sort of pulley system, and their yucca ropes likely were not strong enough to lift or move those rocks around. And this is a picture with Andy Odell, who some of you may remember. He passed away a couple of years ago. At any rate, Andy taught me the astronomy. I helped him with the archaeology. And we were never on a river trip together, but we did drink a lot of beer. Now, keep Andy's height, he's staying 6 foot, keep his height in mind there. And notice that you have two channels. So the channel 1 is the opening, the first opening, and then channel 2 is the second opening. And that's going to provide light coming in at 2 different angles through the season or through the year. This is a picture taken by Dr. Robert Mark when he was working with the U.S. Geologic Service. Bob Mark and Evelyn Billow do some incredible work on petroglyphs. They are world renowned, and they are often traveling to different sites to do documentation on indigenous petroglyphs and pictographs. This picture was taken through the second channel. Now, this comes from National Geographic, and the diagram shows you the position of the sun at the summer, the equinoxes, and then the winter. And it's because of the change in the elevation of the sun that you get these different light daggers coming down through the 2 different channels. And so most of the sites I've researched have been horizon calendars, meaning that you're looking at the sun or the moon as it is rising across the horizon. Now, I want you to look at the right-hand side real quickly, because the spring equinox, you'll see that there's the light dagger on the right, and then a small one up on the upper left. At the summer solstice, the light comes right through the center, and then you have the same pattern as you did before for the fall. And then at the bottom, you can see the matching the 2 light daggers coming on either side of that petroglyph. So if you crawl underneath and you look up, you can now see the 2 channels where the light is coming from. And this photograph was taken by Dr. Rolf Sinclair as part of the Solstice project, along with Anna Safair. But it gives you a good indication of the light coming through and its interaction on the petroglyph. These photos were taken by Andy Odell, and we have them about 1 every minute. I'm going to show you about 1 every 5 minutes. But this is on June 19th, when we were there looking at the movement of the moon on the spiral petroglyph. But you can see the light dagger coming down through the center of the petroglyph. And if you will, look to the upper right, and you can see that smaller petroglyph that's carved in there with a tail that goes up to the top. This then is about 4 or 5 minutes later. And you can see the progression of light coming down through the center of the petroglyph. Now, the width of that is about a nickel. Since these pictures were taken, the middle rock has slipped out of place as compared to where it was. So what has happened is that the light bands now are wider than they were prior to its movement. Now I'm going to go to the equinox. What this was the summer solstice. Now at the equinox, if you were there on September 20th, you would not see this light dagger. And then with 1 day's movement, and it's the time at which the sun is moving the greatest distance across the horizon, then on September 21st, bang, you have this light dagger coming through that upper left-hand spiral. If you follow the summer solstice light dagger down through the year, it becomes the light corridor on the far right side of the spiral petroglyph, and the equinox light pattern that we just saw becomes the far left-hand side. And notice that the light exactly brackets the two sides of the spiral petroglyph. So my hypothesis is that they use that large crack that goes through the center there. That's a geologic crack that was not caused by humans. And then what they use that as their reference marker for determining where was the sun at the summer solstice, where was it at the winter solstice. Okay, let's make it this size, and then let's put our grooves in there. And if you go from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, there are 19.5 grooves across there. Well, that's very close to 19.6 years. And so what ends up happening is that this patterning that I showed you before is marked here on the what's called the light dagger site, but you have the moon that will shine on it. And this picture, this is a picture on the standing on the left-hand side, or right hand if you're facing it, of the rocks. And Andy Odell would have been standing right there by where the opening was, or just in front of it. So that gives you some scale. And this picture was taken by the Solstice Project as well. This is the northern maximum full moon rise, and the light shadow coming right along the left-hand side of the spiral petroglyph. And though I didn't mention it earlier, there is a groove in the rock there. Now, if you look just about 3 fingers from that, where the crack across the rock, the geologic crack, and the light shadow line is, you can see that there's just a very small cut in the rock there. There's a small groove there. And what ends up happening is that because the minimum, the lunar minimum, is within the orbit of the Earth, within the orbit of the sun as we perceive it, what ends up happening is that you can use the sun position as a predictor for what would happen with the moon. And so this is the lunar minimum. Now, you take this and combine it with Hopi and other ancestral Puebloan folklore, and what happens is there are lots of stories about the moon. Not so many about the sun in relative consideration, but lots of stories about the moon. And what we anticipate is that these people were using the moon as their primary calendar system. We do the same. What's the root word of moon? What is the root word of month? I misstated that. I went backwards. It's moon. And so the Hopi mark their calendar as the moons of the wind, the moons of the heavy snows or the light snows, the moons of the eagle, the moons of the rabbit, and so forth, the moons of planting corn. So the moons are very, very important to a lot of Native people. And if you look at human biology, including the female menstrual cycle, it's related to the moon. I'm going to shift now and go up to Chimney Rock, which is up by Pagosa Springs, halfway, well, closer to Pagosa Springs than Durango. And this picture comes from the Museum of Northern Arizona. And you can see the peak in the front there is the Chimney Rock, and the peak on the left back side is what's called Companion Rock. And this photo was taken by Ron Sutcliffe. And what you can see is the moon there in the lower, in the middle. And so this is the northern maximum movement of the moon coming between Chimney Rock and Companion Rock. And so if, let me see if I can go one more. What's going on here? This also is from Ron Sutcliffe. And if you'll look at the, he took these are taken, this picture is taken from atop of the kivas that I'll show you a picture of next. But you can see that only the northern maximum excursion of the moon will come between Chimney Rock and Companion Rock. The next dotted line there on the right-hand side is the summer solstice, and the next one that's further almost off the picture is from the, what shall I say here, the lunar minimum. Okay, well, and this is a photo that I'm not even sure where I got it, but you can see the alignment between the kivas of this site that's up at about 8,000 feet, and the alignment through the between Chimney Rock and Companion Rock. Now, an interesting thing happens at this site. Archaeology, when the archaeologists did their dig, they found that there was a lot of deer bones, some elk bones, larger mammals. And if you look at the archaeological sites and a lot of other places, the types of food people were eating might well have been rats or squirrels or rabbits, occasionally coyote. But rarely do you see elk or deer bones. And so it's thought that this was a site that the priests were going to, and this is at a time in which there's a lot of stress in the Chaco society. And in fact, it's right before Chaco collapses. And then many of those people moved closer to water, either along the Rio Grande River, or some of them went up to Mesa Verde, to Salmon ruins, to Aztec ruins. And so Chaco dissolved rather quickly in terms of human history time. And we now have the different ancestral Puebloan people who have their affiliation with Chaco. So what's the significance of Chimney Rock? It was created in the late 1000s by Chacoan priests. I've already talked about the deer bones. Plant food was carried into the region, and the kivas directly line up with the 18.6-year lunar cycle. And so the mythologies of the Puebloan people then support their watching the sun and the moon patterns and incorporating them into their society. So some very quick conclusions. I use Hopi ethnography as my guideline, and the reason is that the Spanish and the settlers destroyed a lot of the traditional knowledge of the people of the Southwest, as well as other indigenous people across the country. And we have very strong evidence that the Puebloan cultures track the sun, the moon, and the stars. Correspondingly, I want to make one point. The Navajo never had a consistent horizon. They were consistently moving about. And so the Navajo used constellations as their markers of the season. And it's a difference between being sedentary agriculturals and hunter-gatherer migratory. So the sun provides them with seasonal time. However, the moon provides you with the ceremonial time as well as the religious time periods the religious events that are happening. And so there are places such as that we think are sacred. I've done a lot of work at Sun Temple at Mesa Verde, and we think that was both a ceremonial site as well as a site for observing the sky. And I'd like to conclude tonight with a comment that it's my belief that science and religion come from the same root, because they both explain that which is otherwise unexplainable. Now, different methodologies, different sources of information, but the objective is, how do you explain something that you otherwise cannot demonstrate? So science does it by testing, religion does it by observing natural processes, but then interpreting those to have some significance. And so whatever be your proclivity for science or religion, I don't believe that there's a conflict between them other than that which is made for political reasons. So with that, I thank you very much. And I will close out and then take some questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you can stop your share, Bryan.
I think I did. Oh, wait a minute. There's the stop share. There we go.
Cool, thank you. And then let's see if we can unmute everybody. Hey, Susan, do you know how to do that? How to get people to unmute everybody?
Yeah, you can't unmute everyone, but you can ask them to unmute. So I did that.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I've got some questions for Bryan. I'm going to start off here.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, Bryan, just a rough guess, how many of these celestial observatories do you think are in the Grand Canyon?
I only know of the one that I shared with you.
Okay.
And on that particular trip, I went from Phantom to Lee's Ferry. Excuse me. I went from Lee's Ferry to Phantom.
Okay.
Okay.
And then throughout the southwestern U.S., and that includes not just the Colorado Plateau, but geographical Southwest U.S. Roughly, how many are there in the Southwest?
We don't know. Let me come back to your first question, Tom, because I very much suspect that the Wallapai and the Havasupai have their observation places.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the native people are, they have not been treated well by our culture, by Euro-Americans. And so they're very reticent about sharing information about their culture, particularly about their religion, because, you know, that is something very, very, very close to them. But my guess is that many of the Pi people have their own ancestral cultural astronomy sites. Some of them may have lost recognition of where those sites are, but there is, I think, a good very, very high probability that these people have sites where they were observing the sun, the moon, stars, and so forth. You know, I actually think it's part of biology, because if you look at the largest reproductive event in the world is off the coast of Australia and the Barrier Reef, and that's the first full moon following their summer solstice. That would be the December solstice, and that's the largest reproductive event on the planet, driven by a lunar cycle.
Oh, okay, your volume was cutting in and out. I didn't quite get all of that. So just looking at these sites throughout the Southwest, you know, you mentioned 3 of them.
Yeah.
So at least those are there.
They're numerous, and we're still, cultural astronomers are still looking for them,
Right.
but it
Okay.
takes a great deal of time. There's a petroglyph site that, you know, 1, it's a long drive, and 2, it's a hard hike to get to. And so I'm hoping to get out there to observe it before I leave next week. But in terms of the solstice, excuse me, I said that wrong. In terms of the equinox. So it takes a great deal of work to verify whether or not these sites are actually culturally significant and using astronomy.
Okay. Well, Mark B's got a question. He wants to know if you're saying that the European influences had minimal impact on the Hopi culture in comparison to other native cultures.
I would say it has less impact, but it still has been very significant, because a lot of the Hopi kids were taken and put into, you know, BIA schools. So, you know, it's taking kids out of their culture. In fact, there was the Bureau of Indian Affairs had the policy of kill the Indian, save the man. And so I would say that it was less invasive because the Hopi were not relocated, as were the Navajo and the Long Walk, or others, you know, like the Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, and so forth.
Okay, so you're basing that on the fact that they weren't forced to relocate. I see.
Yes.
And then Helen wants to know, when you're describing the Hopi calendar as illustrated by that amazing painting, who created that painting and where can one find a copy of that image?
It's Filmer Kiwanyama, Kewanyaama. Filmer Kiwanyama, and he is in Prescott currently. And if you want, Tom, I could send you his email, and then you could share it with other folks if they're interested in getting a hold of Filmer.
Sure.
Okay, I'll have to do that afterwards, because if I go try to do that now, I'll do something up.
Yeah, no worries. And then I had a question. Of the known sites, it appears as though, just from your referencing today, that they are adjacent to or within close proximity of habitation areas, either kivas or structures. Is that true throughout, or are there any of these sites that are quite remote from habitation in kiva areas?
Most of the sites that I know of are within a mile of a habitation site.
Okay.
And yeah, within a mile. And some of them, you know, maybe a quarter mile. And if you stop and think about it, if they have a kiva, these individuals, the Hopi or other ancestral Puebloan people, would likely be having their ceremony and then leaving early morning to go to a site to observe it. And so they would be traveling potentially in the dark, or, just during that crepuscular time in the morning. And so they're not wanting to go long distances. But then again, they will make those at points where there is the natural occurrence of light in a significant way, that hierophany that I spoke of earlier. And so they'll use the natural the natural revealing of light then to give them some sort of indication. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So-
Okay, any other questions out there? Well, hearing none.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm flattered.
Bryan, thank you so much for this virtual outing this evening.
Oh, you're welcome.
This will be put up on the Grand Canyon Historical Society website. You'll be able to get a link there to see this again if you'd like. And please remember that a month from now, Jerry Snow is going to be talking about the first mail route for U.S. mail through northern Arizona in 1858. And so with that, we will end tonight's meeting and wish you all a pleasant month, and we'll see you again.
Thank you, everyone. I sure appreciate your coming and learning a bit about the cultural astronomy of our native neighbors.
Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you, Bryan. That
welcome.
was really
So
fascinating.
much.
Yeah, thank you, Bryan.
All righty, folks. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.